She was just another face in the crowd until her quiet sobs made him stop mid-step. It was an unusually chilly afternoon for early spring in downtown Portland. The open-air market buzzed with life, vendors calling out their daily specials, children dragging parents to candy stalls, and the scent of fresh bread mixing with the earthy aroma of ripe produce. Amid the vibrant movement, there was a stillness that caught his eye. Nicholas Ward, a self-made tech millionaire known more for his privacy than public appearances, wasn't supposed to be there. He had taken a wrong turn on the way to a board meeting, or so he thought, when he saw her. She stood frozen near a fruit stand, her figure small in an oversized gray coat. Her long chestnut hair, pulled into a messy bun, looked like it hadn't been washed in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and in her trembling arms she clutched a small paper bag. And a little boy, maybe 5 years old, who clung to her like a shadow. Nick had never stopped for strangers. He was raised in a world where problems were handled by assistants, and empathy was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something about the way she was silently crying, shoulders hunched as she tried to keep it together for the child at her side. It pierced through his usual detachment. Before he knew it, he was walking toward her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. The woman jumped slightly, quickly wiping her tears with the back of her sleeve. "Yes, I'm—" Her voice cracked. "I'm fine. Thank you." The little boy peeked out from behind her coat and gave Nick a shy stare. His shoes were 2 sizes too big. The woman glanced down at him and managed a tired smile. "We're just heading home." Nick hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability blooming in his chest. "You drop this," he lied, handing her a dollar bill that wasn't hers. It was a ridiculous gesture. Insulting, maybe. But he didn't know how else to help. She took it, stunned. "Oh, thank you. Are you sure you're okay?" he asked again, quieter this time. She nodded again, more firmly now. "We're just having a hard week." Nick didn't press further. Instead, he gave the boy a small wave and turned to leave. But something in him didn't want to walk away. For the first time in years, he felt like he was in the right place at the right time for someone who needed more than money. That night, the image of the crying woman and her son wouldn't leave his mind. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Nicholas Ward decided he'd return to that market, just in case fate wanted them to meet again. Sometimes it's not the grand gestures that build love. It's the quiet consistency of someone who shows up again. The next Saturday, the market was just as lively. The same chaos of color and sound. But Nick wasn't there for the artisan bread or the fresh fruit. He was there for her. He told himself it was curiosity, or maybe guilt. But deep down, it was something far more human. Connection. He spotted her near the honey stand this time. She looked surprised to see him, though she quickly masked it with a polite smile. She wore the same gray coat, but this time her son was holding a small red balloon, his eyes brighter. "You again," she said, amused. "Couldn't resist the apples," Nick replied with a small grin. "They're apparently better when you find them by accident." She chuckled, a real sound this time. "Well, I hope this visit's less dramatic than the last." Nick nodded, glancing at her son. "And how's the little man?" She bent down and kissed the top of the boy's head. "This is Milo," she said, "and I'm Eva." Nick introduced himself, leaving out the part about the millions in his bank account. For once, he didn't want that part of himself to enter the room first. They talked, lightly, carefully, like two people testing the temperature of the water before diving in. She told him she used to be a teaching assistant, but had to quit after Milo's father left. Now she picked up shifts at a laundromat and cleaned offices at night. It wasn't pity Nick felt. It was admiration. Every word Eva spoke revealed resilience, not bitterness. He returned the next weekend. Then again, and again. Sometimes he brought coffee. Other times he helped carry her groceries. Once he gave Milo a small remote-controlled car. Eva tried to decline it, but Nick insisted. "I have a nephew," he said casually. "Bought one for him, ended up with two." Eva didn't believe him, but she accepted the gift with a smile anyway. Over the weeks, their conversations deepened. They spoke about childhood, dreams that were put on hold, books Eva used to read before life got too busy, and the loneliness that crept in during quiet nights. Nick listened, really listen, in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. Eva noticed things too. How he always looked people in the eyes when he spoke. How he never once checked his phone around her. How Milo had started asking, "Is Nick coming?" every Saturday morning. Still, neither of them dared to name what was growing between them. Not yet. Sometimes the beginnings of love are so gentle, they feel like friendship. But somewhere between their smiles and silences, something beautiful had already begun. She thought he was just a kind stranger. He thought he could keep his world hidden. But secrets don't stay quiet forever. It had been nearly 2 months since that first encounter in the market. Saturdays had become something sacred, a ritual neither of them ever named, yet both of them quietly prioritized. But on a gray Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. Eva had just finished her cleaning shift at the downtown office tower when she spotted a familiar figure stepping into a sleek black car parked across the street. It was Nick. But this wasn't the jeans and coffee Nick she knew. This Nick wore a tailored navy suit, flanked by two sharply dressed men who opened the car door for him with robotic precision. She froze on the sidewalk, stunned. Her heart skipped. The way the suited man addressed him, "Mr. Ward, the investors are already inside," confirmed what her instincts were screaming. He wasn't just some kind man who liked apples. That night, she did something she hadn't done since her college days. She Googled him. Nicholas Ward, tech mogul, founder of Apex Systems, net worth in the hundreds of millions, reclusive, private, rarely seen in public without a security detail. Eva's hand trembled on the mouse. How could she have been so naive? She thought about the balloon for Milo, the coffee he brought, the way he avoided talking about his job. It all made sense now. He wasn't being mysterious. He was hiding. And she had opened her entire world to him. Her poverty, her struggles, her broken heart. She felt exposed. The next Saturday, she didn't show up, nor the one after that. Nick noticed her absence instantly. His calls. She never gave him her number. His only connection to her had been their weekly meetings. He had no way to reach her, and the emptiness left behind was unbearable. He didn't blame her, not really. He had made the choice to keep the truth from her, not out of deceit, but out of fear. He had seen what people became when money was involved, but Ava hadn't asked for anything. She had only ever offered her time, her honesty, and her laughter. On the third Saturday, he made a decision. This time, he found her. He stood outside the laundromat where she worked late nights, a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand, his heart in the other. When she stepped out, she stopped short at the sight of him. "You lied," she said softly, arms folded. "I hid," Nick admitted, "and I'm sorry." Eva looked at him for a long, painful moment. The trust between them had cracked, and even though the man before her looked the same, something had changed. Not everything he said could fix that, but the truth was out now, and from here everything would either fall apart or find its real beginning. Love bloomed in simplicity, but the world he came from was anything but simple. Eva didn't respond to Nick's apology that night. She accepted the flowers, offered a quiet thank you, and walked past him into the dark. Nick stood there in the cold, not chasing her, not forcing anything, just waiting, hoping. Days passed. Eva's mind was a mess of contradictions. Yes, she had feelings for him, real ones, but she couldn't shake the image of that black car, the headlines that called him a billionaire genius, the world he never told her about. She had trusted him, and he had hidden the biggest part of himself. Then came the phone call. It was a reporter. Somehow, someone had seen her at the market with Nick. Now her name was circulating in tabloids as the mystery woman with Nicholas Ward. Her Facebook was flooded. Someone had even messaged her landlord asking about her rent. Eva felt sick. She packed up Milo and went to stay with her older sister in a neighboring town. She didn't tell Nick. She didn't owe him anything now. But Nick wasn't idle. He'd found out about the articles too. When he saw her name dragged through blogs and gossip forums, something snapped. He called in legal favors, had the stories pulled, and demanded privacy reinstated. But the damage was done. Nick didn't want to protect her because he felt guilty. He wanted to protect her because he loved her. And that terrified Eva even more. Could she live in his world? Would Milo be safe there? Could she raise her son surrounded by bodyguards and business scandals? Would Nick's life swallow hers whole? And worse, what if she fell in love completely, only to have him leave when it got complicated? After all, rich men didn't marry women like her. They didn't stay. The next Saturday, Nick waited at the market again, and again, and again, empty-handed. Then on the fourth week, he left something behind. A sealed envelope taped to the apple crate where they first met. No signature, just her name. Inside, Eva found a letter. No grand speeches, no apologies, just, "You never asked for anything from me. That's how I knew it was real. If you ever want me, all of me, I'm here, and I'm not leaving again." Eva stared at the note, her fingers trembling. The war inside her wasn't over. Not yet. But something inside her cracked open again. Not trust, not love, possibility. Even love, when real, is fragile, and doubt has a way of whispering louder than truth. Eva sat on her sister's porch, watching Milo draw chalk stars on the pavement. The letter from Nick was folded in her pocket, worn soft at the edges from being read too many times. Her heart ached with longing, but also fear. What if this wasn't real? What if she stepped back into his world and found herself lost in it? Swallowed by gala dinners, cold elevators and glass towers, people who raised their eyebrows at her worn sneakers and secondhand sweaters. Eva had worked so hard to keep herself together since Milo's father left. Building walls, making plans, becoming both mother and father to her child. She had no room for dreams. And Nick, he was a dream, a dangerous, golden one, the kind that makes you believe and then disappears. That night, as she lay awake beside her sleeping son, her mind drifted back to small things. How Nick always let Milo talk, never interrupting his stories. How he once stood in the rain without an umbrella just to make her laugh. How he never tried to fix her life, only stood beside her in it. Wasn't that what real love looked like? But still, the voice in her head, the one left behind by years of disappointment, whispered, "You're not enough for someone like him." And somewhere across the city, Nick sat alone in his penthouse apartment, staring at his untouched dinner. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't know what to do. He had wealth, power, influence, but none of it could bring Eva back to him, and none of it had meaning without her. He thought about the first time he saw her, crying, holding Milo, pretending to be strong. He had never seen anything braver in his life. He knew she was scared, and he didn't blame her. He had just one fear of his own, that she would let that fear make the final decision. Sometimes all it takes is a child's question, or a look, to light the match again. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Eva was folding laundry while Milo sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with his toy car, the one Nick had given him. He made little engine noises, crashing the car gently into chair legs, giggling at his own sound effects. Then he stopped, looked up at her. "Mom," he said thoughtfully, "is Nick gone forever now?" Eva froze. "What do you mean? He didn't come again. And you're sad again." Milo tilted his head. "Did he stop liking us?" The innocence in his voice was like a pin to her chest. "No," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "He didn't stop liking us." Milo paused for a moment and then asked, "Then why did we leave?" Eva blinked back tears. "Because I got scared." He stared at her the way only children could, with unfiltered truth. "Nick made you smile. Like the big smile, the one with teeth." She laughed softly, pressing her forehead against his. "You notice too much for your age." "Maybe," he said proudly. That night, after putting Milo to bed, Eva sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope again. Not the letter, she knew the words by heart now, but the envelope. Because on the back, in tiny handwriting, he had written a line she'd missed the first time. "P.S. I left your favorite apples at the stand." Still hoping. It was silly, small, but something inside her warmed. So the next morning, for the first time in weeks, she braided her hair, put on her softest sweater, and took Milo's hand. They rode the bus back to the city, back to the market. It wasn't Saturday, The fruit vendor was packing crates early, but the moment she stepped onto the cobbled street, something shifted. Nick was already there, as if part of him knew she would come. He turned slowly, his eyes locking with hers. Neither of them spoke at first. It was Milo who ran to him, arms open, yelling, "Nick!" Nick knelt and hugged the boy tightly. Then he looked up at Eva, his voice quiet. "I wasn't sure if you'd come. I almost didn't," she admitted. "But then I remembered what it felt like to miss you. And I realized I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Nick stepped forward, emotion shining through his usual calm. "Ava, she held up a hand. "Not yet, just hold my hand for now." He took it, gently, like a promise waiting to be made. And as they walked through the quiet market, apples in one bag, a little boy skipping ahead, something unseen but certain was growing between them again. Hope. Not every vow is spoken at an altar. Some are whispered in the quiet, between two hands that refuse to let go. Later that evening, they sat on a park bench beneath a canopy of golden autumn leaves. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the playground where Milo climbed the slide, laughing in the distance. Nick and Eva sat side by side, their hands still intertwined, a gesture that had come naturally and hadn't broken since the market. Neither of them rushed the silence. Finally, Eva turned to him. "Do you know what scared me most?" she asked. Nick looked at her, eyes steady. "That I was pretending?" She shook her head. "That you weren't, that you were real, that this was." He swallowed hard. "Ava, I've had everything people dream of. Money, recognition, power. But until I met you, I'd never had home." Tears welled in her eyes, unspoken fears softening under the weight of his words. "I don't want to be saved," she said quietly. "I don't need a knight. I just want a partner. Someone who walks with me. Not ahead, not behind." Nick nodded. "Then walk with me, both of you." Every step she turned to him, searching his face for hesitation, for a shadow of the man she once feared he could be. But he wasn't hiding anymore. This was Nick, the real one. No suits, no headlines, no glass walls. Just a man who had fallen in love with a single mom in a gray coat at a fruit stand. "And what about your world?" she asked. "I don't belong there." "I'll make a new one," he said, voice steady. "One where you do, one where you lead." He pulled something from his coat pocket. Not a ring, not yet, but a tiny silver key. "This is the key to my lake house. I haven't let anyone in it for years, not even staff. It's quiet, safe. Yours if you want space, or peace, or just time." Ava stared at the key in his palm. It wasn't about property, it was about trust, a promise that he wasn't going anywhere. She took it gently, closed her fingers around it, and whispered, "Okay." Nick smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "We'll go slow. I'll follow your pace." At that moment, Milo ran up to them with his cheeks flushed and his smile wide. "Mom, Nick, look, I did the big slide by myself." Eva stood and opened her arms. "I'm so proud of you, baby." Nick knelt beside him, high-fived him, and said, "You're the bravest kid I know." Milo beamed, looking up at both of them. "Are we a team now?" Ava and Nick glanced at each other, and with one shared look, one full heart, and one simple word, they answered together, "Yes." Love doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it tiptoes in during the smallest, most ordinary moments. The lake house was quiet, tucked between tall trees and the gentle ripples of the water. It felt like a secret world, untouched, undemanding. Eva had hesitated before accepting the key, but now, as she watched Milo run barefoot across the wooden deck with a sandwich in one hand and wildflowers in the other, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Inside, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Nick stood by the stove, awkwardly trying to flip pancakes, despite Eva's laughter and teasing. "You're burning them again," she said, nudging him aside with her hip. "It's called rustic," he said, mock defensive. "And I'm learning." Eva grinned, stealing the spatula. "You're lucky you're cute." He leaned closer, voice low. That's the second time you've said I'm cute. Is this a pattern? She raised an eyebrow. Don't push it. He kissed her forehead anyway. They didn't talk about the past much anymore. There was still healing to do, still parts of both of them that needed time. But in this small bubble they'd created, there was space for joy, for rebuilding. That evening, as the sun dipped below the lake, they sat wrapped in a blanket on the porch. Milo was asleep on Eva's lap, his small frame curled beneath a knitted throw. Fireflies blinked lazily over the water. Nick reached into his coat pocket again, not for a key this time, but a folded, worn piece of paper. He handed it to her silently. Eva opened it, her brow furrowing. It was a crayon drawing, clearly done by Milo. 3 stick figures stood under a tree. A little boy in the middle, a woman with long hair, and a man with tall shoes and big arms. Above it, in shaky handwriting, me, Mommy, and Nick. Eva didn't speak. She just held the paper to her heart, tears falling silently onto her cheeks. Nick gently brushed one away. I didn't ask him to draw it. I know, she whispered. Then she looked up at him, her voice trembling with something between laughter and disbelief. I didn't know I could still have this. Happiness. Nick smiled, his own eyes misted. Neither did I. There were no grand declarations that night, no fireworks, just the quiet, golden kind of joy that settles into your bones when the right people are finally in the right place, at the right time. Fairy tales speak of happily ever after, but real love is tested in the quiet storms that follow the sunshine. The first test came quietly. It started with a phone call late one night while Eva was reading to Milo. Nick stepped out to take it, but Eva could hear the tension in his voice through the thin walls. When he returned, his smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. A board emergency, he said casually. Some investors panicking about market shifts. I may need to be in New York next week. Eva nodded. She understood. Nick wasn't just a man, he was a business empire. But when 1 week turned into 3 and Zoom calls took over their evenings, the warmth of the lake house began to dim. Milo asked once, is Nick coming back again? Or did work take him forever? It broke Eva's heart. Nick returned after a month, exhausted and apologetic, arms full of gifts he hoped would patch over the cracks. Eva smiled, accepted the flowers, but said nothing. That night they fought for the first time, not with yelling, but with silence, hesitation, carefully chosen words that carried too much weight. I'm not angry, Eva said finally, staring out the window. I just, don't want to be someone you come back to only when the world gets quiet. Nick stood behind her, silent for a moment. I didn't mean for this to happen, but I also don't want to give up the company I built. I'm not asking you to, she whispered. I'm asking where we fit into the life you're fighting to protect. His silence answered more than he meant it to. Over the next few months, the rhythm of their life wavered. The calls, the distance, the growing sense that something beautiful was being pushed to the background. Eva began to question, was love enough? Was hope enough? But then something changed. One afternoon, while Nick was in a boardroom in Manhattan, he received a photo on his phone. It was Milo holding a drawing, another crayon masterpiece. This one showed 3 figures again. Only this time, the man was standing apart from the others, waving. And underneath it, in childish letters, come back soon before we forget your hugs. Nick stared at it, the room around him falling away. He stood up mid-meeting, walked out without a word, and got on the first flight home. He didn't come with flowers or gifts. He came with tears in his eyes and a suitcase he planned never to repack. Eva met him at the door. No words, just a long, aching embrace. Love had been tested, stretched, doubted, nearly lost, but it had not broken, because the strongest kind of love isn't the one that never stumbles. It's the one that chooses to stand back up, again and again. Sometimes love doesn't restart where it left off. It begins again, wiser, quieter, stronger. The lake house stayed closed for winter. Eva, Milo, and Nick had moved into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Close enough for Nick to attend meetings in person, far enough to feel like a life of their own. The house was modest by Nick's standards, but it had a garden, a small porch swing, and 3 bedrooms that quickly filled with laughter and Lego bricks. This time, everything was different. Not rushed, not perfect, but real. Nick created boundaries. He stepped back from 2 of his business boards. He no longer answered emails past 6 p.m. He learned how to cook Eva's favorite soup and helped Milo with schoolwork, even if he had to relearn multiplication tables himself. Eva enrolled in night classes to finish the degree she had left behind years ago. She wanted to teach again, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. Their days settled into a rhythm that was far from glamorous, but deeply fulfilling. Saturday mornings were still sacred. Instead of the market, they now had pancake mornings in pajamas. And every once in a while, Nick would bring home a single apple, a small, quiet reminder of where everything began. One rainy afternoon, Eva sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching Milo build a rocket ship out of cardboard in the yard. Nick stepped outside, 2 cups of tea in hand. "You look like you're thinking very hard," he said. Eva smiled and took the cup, just realizing something. "What's that?" "That this life is better than anything I ever let myself imagine." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "You didn't rescue me, Nick. You gave me space to become myself again." He reached for her hand. "And you reminded me who I was supposed to be." They sat in the gentle rain mist, listening to Milo's excited narration of his cardboard mission to the moon. New beginnings weren't always loud. Sometimes they came quietly, in the steady rebuilding of a heart, in the learning of each other's rhythms, in the deep sigh of relief when you realize you're finally safe. There was no final kiss in the sunset, no ending credits, just a simple truth shared between them. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of the life they were always meant to live. When love is real, it doesn't just give, it gives up, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Spring had just begun to warm the trees when Nick received the call. A fire had broken out at one of his company's overseas manufacturing sites, a major facility with hundreds of employees. The damage was extensive. No casualties, but the board was panicking. Investors were threatening withdrawal. The only way to prevent collapse was for Nick to fly out immediately and stay as long as it took to stabilize operations. It meant weeks, maybe months. He sat Eva down that night, his jaw tight. "I don't want to go," he said, "but if I don't, a lot of people lose their jobs, families, livelihoods." Eva didn't hesitate. "Then you have to go." He blinked. "What?" "You built that company. You know how to fix it. And I know your heart, Nick. You won't rest if you walk away." Nick looked at her, the ache behind his eyes barely hidden. "But what if we lose this? What if I come back and you've changed your mind? What if we drift?" She smiled, softly, sadly, and touched his chest. "Then you didn't love me enough to begin with." That hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal. "But," she added, "I think you do. I think this is exactly what love looks like, trusting each other across oceans." So he left. Every day apart was hard. They FaceTimed before bed. Milo showed off his drawings and Eva told Nick about her classes and the new garden she had started planting. But it wasn't easy. Some nights the time zones made calls impossible. Sometimes days passed with only a brief message. Eva missed his quiet presence, the weight of his arm over her at night, the way he always refilled her coffee cup before she realized it was empty. Nick, on the other hand, fought through boardroom fires, media scrutiny, and relentless stress, all while staring at a photo of Eva and Milo tucked in his wallet. Then one night, everything changed. The plant was finally stabilized. A new CEO was appointed to oversee it permanently. Nick had done it, and done it right. But instead of booking the flight home, he made another choice. He resigned. He stepped down from his company. He gave up the empire he'd spent a lifetime building, all for the life he hadn't realized he wanted until he met a woman in a gray coat, crying near an apple stand. Back home, Eva answered the door one breezy evening and found Nick standing there, suitcase in one hand, resignation letter in the other. "I've been chasing the wrong thing my whole life," he said, "but not anymore." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. No words, Just the quiet understanding that what he gave up was everything he once thought defined him, and what he got in return was everything that truly mattered. Not all love stories end with a wedding. Some end with a rhythm, a home, a life finally in tune. The house smelled of fresh lavender and sunlight. It had been a year since Nick had come home for good. The world still whispered his name in articles and stock analyses, but he no longer listened. He no longer needed to. His hands were now familiar with gardening gloves and playground sand, not conference tables and shareholder calls. Eva finished her teaching certification. She now taught third grade at the local school, Milo's school, and every afternoon they walked home together, sometimes stopping for ice cream, sometimes talking about planets or poems or the dreams only 8-year-olds believe in. Nick picked them up when it rained. Always on time, always with a dry jacket in the back seat and a silly story ready to make Milo laugh. They had settled into a rhythm, not a perfect one. They still argued sometimes. Life still surprised them, but it was theirs. One summer evening, as the sun sank low and golden across the porch, Eva sat in a hammock with her bare feet swaying lazily above the grass. Nick grilled dinner, apron stained, humming some off-key song. Milo chased fireflies barefoot, his laughter echoing through the trees. It was ordinary, simple, and completely, beautifully full. Nick turned from the grill, holding up a burnt hot dog with mock pride. Gourmet. Thoughts? Eva laughed. Charcoal. Classic, he bowed. Only the best. Later that night, after Milo had fallen asleep, his arms wrapped around a stuffed robot Nick had bought him a year ago, the two of them sat outside under the stars. No phones, no distractions, just the night air and each other. Eva rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever miss it? That other life? Nick thought for a long moment. Sometime, he said. But then I remember, I built a company for 10 years and never once laughed as hard as I do now in our kitchen. Eva smiled, her fingers laced with his. This feels like music, she whispered. Nick turned to her. What kind? The kind that doesn't need words, just harmony. And it was true, no proposal, no ceremony, no flashing cameras, just love, steady, strong, unshaken by time or fame or fear. It began in a marketplace. It grew in silence and in storms, and it settled finally into the kind of ending that isn't an ending at all, just a melody that plays on, sweet and sure. Together, they had found what so many search for, not happily ever after, but something better, peace, partnership, and a life finally in tune.